Man on the inside who was right all along by Seth Emerson. Greg Shaheen, former senior vice president of the NCAA, joins us on Sikkim 365 Radio. Greg, thank you very much. I got to tell you, man, I love this story by Seth, and I love what you tried to do. Has anybody contacted you with any kind of decision-making since even yesterday's article came out saying, please come back and help us?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. The outreach has been spent the majority of my time since Monday talking to folks who both are recalling now what was going on and how the pieces fit together, and others who want to talk about, where things are and where things will go. And it's just very interesting, but it's been a topic on everybody's mind all the way along. And I credit Seth because he had done a lot of homework before he contacted me. And a tweet I had written just obscurely about a year ago got his attention, and he did his homework and then gave me a call, and it went from there.
Greg, the analogy I used after I read this was you are the guy in the disaster movie telling everybody the volcano is about to erupt, and the NCAA was being like, no, well, fine, there's no volcano here. And then everybody's, kind of running for the hills when it does happen. Did you, when was the point where it turned where you felt like no one was listening to you at all?
Well, I mean, in a way, when I first was educating myself, once I was given the assignment of overseeing our media and marketing rights, and sat in meetings where the video games were shown to me, and I looked around the room and just said, okay, now help me again with how that's not likeness, because that resembles, and it happened to be a set of players that I immediately thought, okay, well, there is a resemblance there. And I had never really, quite honestly, spent a lot of time thinking about likeness at that point. And it was just interesting. From there, every conversation that I would have on the topic became very complicated because it had been well-traveled ground. It had been thought out. You'll recall 10, 15 years ago, a lot of this also was coming out about football jerseys, people wearing football jerseys of the players, and is that fair? And how's the money accrue to the student athletes? And it really reflects, kind of to take your question in total. And by the way, most people just would call me the disaster, not the guy forewarning about the disaster. But I would oftentimes find that there just was so much well-traveled history on these topics. It was hard to get a discussion going about reality, about what was happening out there. And it's hard, especially in the NCAA national office. I really felt like there was always the need for people to better understand what happens in that building, because it really, it still is confusing and still is not well understood, that the folks in that building are really carrying out what the majority of the membership tells them to do. They're really not making a lot of decisions. They're on their own. They're interpreting them as they've been guided to do, but they're simply, trying to carry out what the membership has voted on. So part of it is the process and the diversity of the membership that gets us in some of these quandaries.
So, Greg, and that's a very good point that you made that I think is what everybody, really, that's what everybody needs to remember is these are still the schools in charge, basically, at the end of the day. But you at one point in August of 2007, and here we are in 2022, wrote that the NCAA was leaving $4 to $8 million a year on the table by not allowing video game developer EA Sports to use the real name, image, and likeness of college basketball players. And this also would extend, obviously, into the college football game as well. And now here we look up, and the college football game looks like it might be coming back in this NIL era. But pointing that out, how much differently would things have been if they had listened to you in August 2007 simply about the NCAA basketball game?
Well, I thanks for the question, because it gives me the opportunity to just kind of lay something else out that never gets talked about, and that is, the number 48 million. I think I tossed out as kind of an initial number, but what is really interesting is to be clear, the NCAA as an organization would not have gotten that money. That money would have gone to CBS, because at the time CBS had all the marketing and licensing rights. So it wasn't as if I was out there, or we were out there trying to, pursue money on somebody else's back. It was, we're trying to do everything we can to help CBS make the overall agreement that we had with them work. And also, because I was spending more and more time with student athletes and the student athlete advisory committees, it just became clear that there had to be a solution somewhere. And I found it interesting, and I'm sure you all have experienced this as well. When you sit and talk with student athletes, it's amazing how smart they are. I wish I had that. I was as level-headed as young people are. I wish I was even anywhere close to that when I was their age. And what I found in those conversations was that a lot of these issues, we should have involved them from the start, and we should have involved them in the solution. We should have involved them, we should have hired lawyers, help them sort out and hire their own set of lawyers. And let's all get in a room and find a solution, and basically defer to the student athletes largely on how this structure could be set up, because there has to be a way to make all of this work. It'd be different if the system was really struggling. And right now it has a success problem in many ways. And there have to be better ways to do this. And it just was very hard to get all the right people in a room to talk without any pretense about what we might do. So your point's spot on. What could have been possible, only would get harder by the day, the week, the month, as time would go on.
Where did the it's not likeness because we say it's likeness, where does that root come from? Because that is a legal sticky wicket for even someone who's, I'm not a lawyer, but I would not go into court and say this is not the murder weapon because I say it's not. That's not a good argument.
No, you're right, but you got to remember this is a private membership organization, or a quasi-public membership organization, voluntary membership organization. So they can kind of the rule book that often gets talked about. They get to define the standards and process by which all of these things work. And so, if you really pause for a moment and just think about all the things. So is it, what happens in broadcast, or when a student athlete's named on a radio broadcast or online, or used in a banner ad, or just their number? Or what about, you have teams that have the student athletes' names on the back of the jersey. You have some that don't. Are they, when do you get to the point that it's actual likeness? So I appreciated the fact that it needed to be figured out. My point was just on instinct. Once it was very clear, I thought that someone could reasonably conclude that, that looks like Smokey. Well, then that a reasonable purchaser or user of the program or user of the product or whatever, would make that association. So what is Smokey's piece in this deal? And you raise that topic, and it just, it makes everybody uncomfortable. And how you negotiate that path, understanding the premise of amateurism, that has long been the kind of the cornerstone of the NCAA's existence. And it's just a very complicated space.
Miles Brand passed away again soon after a lot of these times when you and him were talking, and he was relying on you a little bit, and he passed away, unfortunately, of pancreatic cancer. Was that the end of it right there when he passed? Because it seemed like that was your guy, right? And you were his guy in a way. At least he was listening to you. When he passed away, Greg, did it end?
Well, I think in many ways I ended at that point.
Okay.
He passed in September of 2009, and I was there for a couple of years longer, really in hopes of getting both the media agreement done, which we did in 2010, and then onboarding whoever the new president would be at that time. And you know what? It was such a unique period. If you remember, obviously there was controversy and a lot of chatter when Miles came on board. His famous speech where he talked about turning down the volume of commercialism and so forth at the National Press Club. But also then he was known for firing some head coach in basketball. I can't remember who it was, but apparently somebody pretty well known. And so everybody had concluded that he would be a certain way. He really turned out to be, he was a trained philosopher. I can remember a number of management meetings when he would kind of get mad at us, senior management, and just say, "You're not here to just listen to me. You're here to challenge me. Mm-hmm. We're here to make sure we get to the right results. So if you're just going to sit and listen to me, you're working at the wrong place." And just from my background and perspective, that was an amazing style. That's what led to us starting to do, things with the NBA and having a more cooperative relationship. That's what led to us taking things on. And, he took on academic reform first, and that consumed the first 5 or 6 years of his time. And this, as academic reform got more into place, this wound up being one of the topics that he really wanted to get sorted out. And it was unfortunate. I still remember the final couple of conversations I had with him at his home. And he was apologetic. He was apologetic that he said, "I'm leaving you stranded as it relates to the media rights negotiations. And I'm just not going to be able to help with the likeness topic. I'm sorry we didn't get that one done." And so, at that point in time, really understood that it was almost a reset, and there was going to be a lot of work to be done if that was ever to see the light of day again.
Greg, when the O'Bannon lawsuit occurred, what do you remember the initial reaction being, and was there anybody maybe outside of yourself that realized what a ticking time bomb that was really going to be?
Yeah, it was taken very seriously. The NCAA, is the ready-made target for litigation on so many topics, so it's got to be kind of conditioned that way. But it took it very seriously from the beginning. My emails and various documents have always been kind of the first things introduced, and the depositions and so forth. I've had the pleasure of sitting through a variety of depositions, and to me, it was always very, very interesting. That was a very interesting experience because it was frustrating to the plaintiff often when I was being deposed, because my answers would be, I spent my whole time there trying to get us to talk more about it and to try and figure out what could happen. And so I was, kind of one of the outliers compared to, those who were having to, whose job it was to really interpret the existing rules and to kind of toe the line on that. So it was always very interesting. I know I frustrated a number of plaintiffs' attorneys because there just was no middle ground. It was very clear to me this was a topic that deserved discussion. There were solutions that could be found, but it was really going to require the right people to be set around the table and be patient enough to get it done. And it was ironic that I found probably the most patient of those individuals or those entities to be the student athletes by a large margin. They were wonderful about the topic, and I spent tens of hours talking with them about it.
Greg, we appreciate your time. I would love to, and we've got a guest coming up, at Adam Flagler from Baylor. I would love to find out how much money in the end the NCAA lost that they could have saved by trying to save all of their money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. They have spent a significant amount of money. I think that USA Today had it last week, where they spent hundreds of millions of dollars over the last handful of years in legal defense and legal fees. And you know what? Again, my hope had been for there to be a solution for it to work for everybody. There's a success problem when people like what you do, and people by greater and greater numbers want to be want to be associated with it. People who never went to college love the college in their community. I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity. Seems to me that there were solutions. I think there still are solutions. And I think it could work out for everybody, but, it really does require that kind of clear, patient thinking to see it through, and everybody's willingness to compromise.
Greg, great stuff. Again, Seth Emerson, theathletic.com. And Greg, two things. I hope that you are contacted to help run whatever's left of the NCAA, and I mean that. Joe Moglia was on with us a week or two ago. He has some great ideas as well. Great man, yeah. I wish the two of you were the ones running the meetings and people listen to you. And God bless you for trying to help. And we appreciate your time. And if you don't mind, I'd like to get you on again sometime here pretty soon.
Absolutely. Anytime on any topic. Glad to do it. I really appreciate it.
Greg Shaheen, former NCAA senior vice president, who tried to explain to the NCAA that they were in quicksand and maybe going to just drown, and no one really would listen to him except the late Miles Brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great article. I kind of hate that we have to go back to back because I had a couple more questions that I wanted to ask him about. They were specifically referring there to the NCAA digging their heels in and just basically denying reality. Well, here we are in another setting where it seems like there's people going, instead of, well, how do we make this work? They're going, well, how do we put it back in the box? And so I wish we could explore that more, but obviously we'll have him on again at some point. So, I do appreciate what we got to hear right there.
He did tell me that, in fact, perhaps we can get back with him. I could try to get a couple more questions to him.